the giant octopus, one of the largest predators on the ocean floor.
If you want someone demolished, I guess you have to demolish them yourself.
44 SpongeBob theories, 7 levels. This is the ultimate SpongeBob Iceberg. We're going to start with some light SpongeBob weirdness and then dig deeper into some truly disturbing ideas. Let's start at the tip of the iceberg. Level 1. Patrick and Gary are cousins. The Season 4 episode Rule of Dumb introduced a surprising and frankly weird family connection between Patrick and Gary the Snail. The plot centers on Patrick discovering that he's descended from royalty via King Amoeba and Queen Mildew. But then a twist reveals that Patrick's father, Herb Star, and Gary's father, Sluggo Star, are brothers, which makes Patrick and Gary first cousins. And also, it's Gary who is connected to royalty and not Patrick. The family tree traces back to Ma Tucket and Billy Bob Star, whose sons, Herb and Sluggo, fathered Patrick and Gary, respectively. Look, the absurd biology and lack of logic means that it's not even worth trying to figure this one out. But Gary's royal status and family connection to Patrick were never revisited in later episodes, leaving that little dynamic unexplored. But still, Gary, Patrick, brothers, that's just weird. Purgatory. In the episode SB-129, Squidward accidentally travels 2,000 years into the future and later enters a void called Nowhere after a time machine malfunction. This episode led to a much bigger theory that SpongeBob SquarePants characters exist in an underwater purgatory, with Bikini Bottom serving as a liminal space for souls trapped between life and death. Squidward's apparent death in the malfunction, complete with his flattening and explosion, suggests his soul arrived in this afterlife, but look beyond this episode and there's more proof of the bizarre in-between world. Many believe that Bikini Bottom itself represents the aftermath of nuclear testing, linked to the real-world Bikini Atoll, with mutated sea creatures eternally repeating their routines as punishment or unresolved trauma, as if they're ghosts still haunting the world. SpongeBob's unchanging optimism and resilience, despite his constant setbacks, suggest an endless, repetitive existence. Even the Krusty Krab's endless burger production and Plankton's constantly futile formula thefts seem to hint at an eternal loop. But what's even darker is that the characters seem unaware of their fate, perpetually reenacting their roles without hope of escape. Squidward is depressed. Of all the characters in SpongeBob, there's no question that Squidward is the most depressing. But some theories suggest that he's not just grumpy, he's actually showing signs of serious depression. Squidward's constant downbeat attitude, irritability, and existential dissatisfaction stem from his unfulfilled dreams in life and his isolation in Bikini Bottom. As a highly intelligent octopus surrounded by less intelligent creatures like a brainless sponge and an idiotic starfish, he struggles with a serious sense of alienation. His job as a Krusty Krab cashier, which he despises, clearly just makes it even worse, putting him in a position where he's constantly hopeless about things. All symptoms of major depressive disorder. Episodes frequently highlight his depressive traits: suicidal ideation, I wonder if I'm being dropped from this height is enough to kill me, loss of interest in hobbies like clarinet, and social isolation. The Squidville episode is one of the best to show his constant despair in life. Even when relocating to a community of squids just like him, he finds their conformity stifling, reverting to loneliness. Even when surrounded with people like him, he's unhappy. His artistic and musical pursuits, which are constantly sabotaged by SpongeBob's antics or just his own perfectionism, make it clear that he has potential, but he isn't pursuing it. Squidward is trapped in an unwelcoming environment that just reaffirms how meaningless his life and existence is. SpongeBob's mimicry. Throughout the series, we see SpongeBob constantly imitating or impersonating other people for fun or to achieve something. But some theories suggest this actually stems from deep-seated insecurity and the belief that SpongeBob doesn't know who he is. Take an episode like Mimic Madness, where his compulsive imitation of Patrick, Squidward, and Sandy becomes so extreme that he loses his core identity entirely, requiring friends to remind him who he is again. His existence relies entirely on other people's perceptions of him, and his impressions of those people suggests he wants to be liked just as they are. But whenever he does this, it inevitably leads to chaos, because of course nothing ever works for SpongeBob unless he's being himself, and even then, it's kind of iffy if it will work out for him. George, they're on to us! In the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, SpongeBob encounters a gorilla, a real one, and he immediately questions why or how a gorilla could possibly exist and survive underwater. Suddenly, the gorilla nervously responds, "Well, you see, it's funny you should say that. George, they're on to us," before fleeing with a zebra named George. It's a bizarre moment, not unexpected for SpongeBob, but it sparked an entire theory that Bikini Bottom exists within a Truman Show-style fabricated reality, while characters like the gorilla and George hint at off-screen actors. The show's writers have never confirmed nor denied the theory, but they continue to put in little self-referential jokes about their own world building into the scripts, which means it's possible. Nuclear test theory. One of the most popular theories claims that the characters of SpongeBob SquarePants are mutated sea creatures resulting from U.S. nuclear testing at Bikini Atoll between 1946 and 1958. You see, Bikini Bottom is named after the real-world Bikini Atoll in the Marshall Islands, where 23 nuclear devices were detonated in those years. Believers have pointed to evidence including the show's retro aesthetic, its weird 1940s or 50s style technology and handwritten letters, which aligns with the post-war era of the tests, while Sandy Cheek's spacesuit and Rock Bottom's bizarre inhabitants hint at radiation-induced weirdness. But there's an even more direct piece of evidence often overlooked. Whenever there's an explosion in Bikini Bottom, it looks exactly like the mushroom cloud shape of the 1946 underwater detonation. The only contradictions, then, are the fact that SpongeBob's grandmother predates the tests, suggesting she couldn't have been mutated, and that humans like Patchy the Pirate occasionally appear, undermining the surface world is gone narrative. But then again, this is a cartoon, so it's whatever we want it to be. Level 2. SpongeBob is adopted. In 2009, a scene from the special SpongeBob's Truth or Square showed a bizarre flashback featuring a young SpongeBob in a cage-like crib. Given that the show has long talked about SpongeBob being born naturally, it feels odd. Or to put it more clearly, SpongeBob was adopted. After all, SpongeBob has a distinctly upbeat, childlike personality, and for much of the series, he's not explicitly tied to his parents, suggesting that he developed these traits to cope with early abandonment or instability in his life. But we also have to factor in the real-life nature of sea sponges. Most sea sponges reproduce asexually, making traditional parental relationships basically impossible. So, if SpongeBob resulted from that asexual process, he might not have parents in the conventional sense. But then we have to accept that the show's absurdist logic leaves room for flexibility. After all, Pearl, a whale, is supposedly the daughter of a crab, so I guess we have to abandon logic. The crib scene remains unexplained in canon, and most likely, it never will be. Mrs. Puff's life before boating school. When Mrs. Puff first appeared in the show, she was a sweet maternal figure, but the further into the series we get, the more unhinged and insane she seems to become. In fact, the show is actively hinting that Mrs. Puff harbors a criminal past. In the episode No Free Rides, she panics after giving SpongeBob an unearned license, exclaiming, "No, not again," implying that she's done it before and had to relocate and rebrand. Which fits with other hints dropped by the show, suggesting she fled New Kelp City after a student she improperly licensed caused a fatal accident, leading her to adopt a new identity in Bikini Bottom. Other evidence is undeniable. A newspaper headline in Lighthouse Lewis labeled her as a deranged boat teacher who evaded authorities using balloon animals, a tactic she repeats in No Free Rides while stealing SpongeBob's boat. Her homicidal behavior in episodes like Demolition Doofus, where she attempts to kill SpongeBob during a demolition derby, and her 6 arrests for crimes like littering and jury duty avoidance don't exactly paint her as a good, innocent person. In fact, the less we know, probably the better. Sister Sam. SpongeBob lore has never been particularly consistent, but the mystery of Patrick's sister is a major question mark. Some people believe that Sam never even existed. In the Season 7 episode Big Sister Sam, Patrick claims he lost Sam at the surf when they were kids, yet later episodes like Something Smells show him stating he doesn't have a sister at all, which suggests that either Sam was just erased from existence in the show, or she was always a made-up fictional person by Patrick. And then came the Patrick Star bizarre show, and it muddied the waters even more. The show introduced Squidina, Patrick's adopted squid sister, and never again mentioned Sam whatsoever. So what happened? According to some online, the spin-off exists in an alternate dimension or multiverse, where Squidina replaces Sam as part of a revised backstory. Others suggest Sam's absence in the spin-off aligns with Patrick's tendency to forget family members or invent stories, which happens. There was a whole episode where Patrick, it turns out, mistook two total strangers for his own parents. But it remains a mystery if Sam ever truly existed, or if Patrick just invented her. Sandy is a government experiment. Who is Sandy Cheeks? That's a question nobody ever asks, except for the people who are convinced that she is just wrong. After all, what is a squirrel doing in an undersea community, and especially a squirrel with so much advanced technological knowledge? But that equipment is way more than any typical Marine would need, which suggests something more. And that's where people start to think that Sandy is actually a government experiment. Some even suggest her role as a marine biologist serves as a cover for monitoring mutated sea life, the kind that would come from Bikini Atoll's nuclear tests. Mr. Puff. We all know that Mrs. Puff's background is extremely shady, but one theory takes it all to a whole other level. In the episode Krusty Love, SpongeBob reveals that Mrs. Puff doesn't like to talk about whatever happened to her husband. That vagueness has led fans to speculate darker motives, noting her history of violence, criminal activity, and apparent guilt about strange things. Mrs. Puff's homicidal tendencies are often showcased in episodes like Demolition Doofus, where she attempts to kill SpongeBob during a demolition derby, shouting, "Why are you still alive?" while maniacally destroying property. But her criminal record also includes 6 arrests for offenses ranging from littering to jury duty evasion, and she once stole a boat to fleeing Bikini Bottom, lamenting, "Not again, I've got to end this before it begins." This line implies a pattern of fleeing past misdeeds, possibly like the murder of her husband. In the SpongeBob movie, a lamp is seen that looks suspiciously like a pufferfish, leading some to suspect that she may well have had him killed and transformed into a lamp. Theories suggest she either orchestrated his death or directly caused it. While the show officially attributes Mr. Puff's lamp fate to humans, Mrs. Puff's refusal to address it and her violent tendencies leave room for other interpretations. Pearl's mom. One of the most popular mysteries of the entire series is how the heck is Mr. Krabs Pearl's father? But another mystery is right there in front of us. Where is her mom? Well, some people believe she's dead. We know from the show that Pearl's mother is named Mrs. Krabs and that she was also a whale. But that's about all we know about her, and this is where people start getting very creative to figure it all out. Fan theories suggest Mrs. Krabs was killed by fishermen, the hunters of the sea. Mr. Krabs later discovered Pearl as an orphaned calf beside her deceased mother. Not only does this answer the question of what happened to Pearl's mom, but it also gives a reason for Mr. Krabs' intense fear of fishhooks. Think about that. He's often warning SpongeBob and Patrick about their dangers, hinting at a traumatic past tied to human interference, like the murder of his beloved wife. And what does Krabs say whenever he feels shocked or distressed? Mother of Pearl! Clearly, his mind is always on her and whatever happened to her. The creator, Steven Hillenburg, openly wished that nobody would ever know the answer to that question, constantly rejecting pitches to explore Mrs. Krabs' story, preferring to leave it unresolved. But the open-ended mystery means that it's entirely possible that Mrs. Krabs died, leaving Pearl in the questionable care of Mr. Krabs. If you want more SpongeBob content, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. Level 3. Karate is a metaphor for sex. It's become an increasingly popular theory that the episode Karate Choppers uses karate as a metaphor for sexual activity between SpongeBob and Sandy. Since then, their frequent and usually impulsive karate encounters disrupt SpongeBob's work at the Krusty Krab, suggesting a kind of hookup mentality. The episode also has more suggestive elements, like Sandy rejecting SpongeBob's late-night karate request, which, sounds a lot like a booty call. Mr. Krabs ultimately makes an ultimatum, demanding SpongeBob stop karate or lose his job. SpongeBob and Sandy's attempt to suppress their urges during a park picnic fails catastrophically, culminating in a chaotic tree-breaking karate session. Or in the case of this theory, totally uncontrolled, unlimited passion. Mr. Krabs decides to monetize their dynamic by using their karate skills to speed up the cooking process. I don't really know what that one means, but I'm not sure I really want to. Mrs. Puff tries to murder SpongeBob. Mrs. Puff is obviously not the sweet-hearted woman she was when she arrived, but the theory that Mrs. Puff harbors homicidal intentions towards SpongeBob is barely even a theory at this point. It's all proven by her increasingly erratic and violent behavior across the series. In Demolition Doofus, she manipulates SpongeBob into participating in a demolition derby purely for the thrill and satisfaction of killing him. But when he survives initial collisions, she's outraged, shouting, "Why are you still alive?" Her aggression escalates as she rams into bystanders and destroys her own boating school, all while laughing maniacally and desperately trying to kill him. This episode is the biggest proof of her willingness to endanger SpongeBob's life at any cost. But we get even more evidence in No Free Rides, where Mrs. Puff refuses to expel SpongeBob despite his incompetence. It suggests that Mrs. Puff has a pattern of past students causing tragedies, leading her to adopt extreme measures to try and correct the errors she began. Mrs. Puff also shows clear signs of kleptomania and delusional episodes, classic symptoms of deeper psychological turmoil. There's no doubt that her repeated failures to teach SpongeBob driving just amplify her latent violent tendencies. She's totally, utterly psychotic. Skin theory. The skin theory suggests that the characters in SpongeBob are wearing external shells or costumes as protective layers, hiding some more unsettling or primal forms underneath. When we think of the show, there are endless examples where characters remove body parts or costumes to reveal entirely different creatures underneath. For example, in Imitation Crabs, a fish's oversized head is pulled off, exposing a smaller head underneath, with the guy mentioning that he went to a head enhancement clinic rather than a disguise shop. But then we also see Sandy Cheeks pulling back her squirrel suit sleeve to expose a muscular human arm in Muscle Bob buff pants. Patrick has removed his skin multiple times, and other characters too have decided to unveil their true self. It all suggests a world where their appearances are intentionally shaped to mask some kind of evolutionary mishap or to hide their natural predatory instincts. Whatever is under the surface, it doesn't seem to be good. The guy on the penny. In the episode Penny Foolish, Mr. Krabs obsessively tries to take a penny SpongeBob fine, but the episode never really gives a reason for why he wants it, and his usual penny-pinching ways don't make much sense here. The episode led people to suspect something more was going on, with one interpretation suggesting the man depicted on the penny symbolizes a guilt-inducing figure from Krabs' past. After all, we know that Krabs was in the army at some point, which means this man could easily be a naval comrade he betrayed for profit or a family member he financially abandoned. So now Krabs would be so fixated on retrieving the coin, not just for monetary value, but to suppress the unresolved shame he feels tied to the face on it. And look at the other moments in the episode. He starts hallucinating pennies in everyday objects, constructing elaborate schemes, and even invades SpongeBob's home, all to reclaim the coin. Has he ever been this desperate to get one coin? It seems more like a desperate compulsion than just old-fashioned greed. So if the penny's imagery represents some kind of moral failing, his manic behavior could be explained as an attempt to erase the reminder by possessing the physical object itself. Of course, the penny is later revealed to be a soggy $500 bill somehow, which just reaffirms the total futility of his obsession. The show never explicitly confirms this psychological angle, but Krabs' established backstory of growing up in poverty suggests that money is definitely some kind of traumatic trigger for him, but whether he has some deeper guilt remains unknown. Pearl's dad is in prison, so the unconventional father-daughter relationship between Mr. Krabs, a crab, and Pearl, a sperm whale, has obviously fueled a lot of fan theories about her parentage, but it seems like nobody is convinced that Mr. Krabs is truly Pearl's father. In fact, one theory suggests that Pearl's biological father is imprisoned for some kind of crime, while Mr. Krabs acts as her adoptive guardian. In the episode Jailbreak, a gray sperm whale inmate helps Plankton escape prison, and according to people who buy into this theory, this character could be Pearl's real biological father, as his species and physical traits match hers almost exactly. The theory suggests he's helping Plankton as a kind of revenge on Mr. Krabs, possibly for framing him in a crime related to Pearl's mother's death, which, as we know, is a big open question mark. The current popular theory about Pearl's mom's death is that it was some kind of whale hunting incident involving fishing hooks. The show has consistently shown that Mr. Krabs has an extreme fear of fishing hooks, like trauma from witnessing Pearl's mother being killed by whale hunters. It's been suggested that this incident is why Krabs decided to adopt her. In fact, some fans have gone as far as to argue Mr. Krabs may have framed Pearl's biological father to conceal his own involvement in her mother's death, whatever that may have been. SpongeBob Invader Pants. SpongeBob is such a weird character that some people don't even believe he is a real resident of Bikini Bottom, but a creature influenced or controlled by aliens. One of the most consistent theories is the Goofy Goober alien death cult theory, which suggests that the Goofy Goober ice cream rituals in the SpongeBob SquarePants movie represent a brainwashing mechanism from outer space. Patrick's post-ice cream hallucinations of a UFO, which matches the fake UFO design from the training video, suggest the dessert contains subliminal messaging to indoctrinate characters into an extraterrestrial belief system. And of course, SpongeBob and Patrick are so clueless that they are very easy to manipulate. This ties into the broader theme of SpongeBob's reality being manipulated, which we can see in episodes like Sandy's Rocket, where SpongeBob and Patrick mistake Bikini Bottom for an alien-constructed simulation after a joyride in Sandy's spaceship. They accuse aliens of projecting their memories onto the environment, even targeting Gary as a perceived threat. It's easy to see how easy they are to convince. But even Gary raises questions. In Sleepy Time, Gary's dream features interdimensional knowledge, while Fungus Among Us implies he carries extraterrestrial pathogen. Krabs Army. Mr. Krabs is a lot of things. A greedy crab, yes, but he's also containing a lot of hidden trauma, according to one theory. Born in 1942, according to his driver's license, Mr. Krabs' age places his naval service during the Vietnam War era between 1955 and 1975, which aligns with the implication from the show that Bikini Bottom is right next to the US-controlled Marshall Islands, where nuclear testing was ongoing in the Bikini Atoll throughout the 1940s and 50s. The episode Krusty Krab training video explicitly references his post-war experience, depicting him isolated in a dark room with an unnamed bottle beside him after the war, followed by a deep depression that seemed endless. But even his military discipline appears in his managerial habits, such as strict routines and weird phrases. Reddit theories always talk about his continued use of naval terminology and camaraderie with veteran characters like the Squirrel Pirate, who may even have served alongside him. The show is constantly hinting that he's just covering up the horrors he witnessed. After all, Bikini Atoll has a real-world history as a nuclear test site. His eventual rebound via the Krusty Krab might not be the entrepreneurial success he says it was. It might just be a way to escape the psychological torment of what he saw. The French narrator is a real character. Who is the French narrator? According to one theory, he's not just some guy making weird little voiceover jokes. He's an in-universe marine biologist documenting Bikini Bottom's residence as part of a fictional documentary. The narrator is a parody of Jacques Cousteau, a real-life oceanographer and filmmaker known for underwater documentaries, poking fun at his many tropes, including his accent, role as an observer, and occasional on-screen appearances wearing a red beanie reminiscent of Cousteau's signature headwear. But think about what he does in the show. The narrator's omniscient commentary, the way he usually explains marine phenomenon or character behaviors, doesn't seem like a casual viewer, feels more like a scientific observer's perspective. For example, in Help Wanted, the very first episode of the show, he details SpongeBob's job-seeking journey as if conducting a nature study. And in Feral Friends, Sandy directly interacts with him, addressing him as Frenchie and treating him as though he's actually present. That all suggests he exists within the show's world, possibly filming from a submarine close enough that they know he's there. Feral Friends. The episode Feral Friends takes a strong turn from the usual antics of the show. It presents Bikini Bottom society as a very, very fragile thing, with Neptune's moon exposing the latent animalistic instincts of the residents beneath their cartoonish civility. When the glowing moon emerges, its radiation de-evolves marine life from their intelligent selves into primal versions of themselves. Patrick becomes a sluggish sea star, Mr. Krabs reverts to a territorial crab, and Squidward transforms into a predatory giant octopus. The only one not affected is Sandy, thanks to her non-marine biology. She becomes the sole arbiter of reason, scrambling to contain the chaos. But even her struggle is just another reminder that there's no plan B for this. There are no emergency protocols, no collective memory of past cycles, despite the moon's 100-year recurrence, and no natural resistance among citizens. When the moon comes out, it's like the Purge. Everyone can kill anyone. Level 4. Squidward Torture. Of all the characters on the show, no SpongeBob character suffers more than Squidward tentacles. Squidward is constantly subjected to extreme, often cruel mistreatment for comedic effect, which can sometimes cross into unsettling territory. In the early episodes, his suffering was framed as consequences of his cynicism, like in the episode Jellyfishing, which saw his disdain for SpongeBob and Patrick's antics leading to a jellyfish electrocution. But as the show goes on, there's less and less reason for him to suffer, and even fans notice that later seasons escalated scenarios into sadistic spectacles, stripping away any narrative justification and straight up punishing him. Ink Lemonade depicts Patrick forcibly extracting ink from Squidward through terror, causing visible pain, while bystanders laugh and enjoy the results. It's unnecessary and cruel, but the show revels in it. Krusty Krab is a lobster trap. Why does the Krusty Krab look like that? We're not talking about the nautical theme, we're asking why the outside of the building looks like a lobster trap. Well, some people have ideas. The series creator, Steven Hillenburg, confirmed that the restaurant's architecture is modeled after a lobster trap, a detail inspired from his time working at a seafood restaurant. But now fans are convinced that this design choice is hiding a deeper truth: Mr. Krabs' exploitation of crustaceans for his Krabby Patties. But there's more evidence within the series to back it up. In the episode Midlife Crustacean, Mr. Krabs bites into a Krabby Patty and makes an offhand comment, "So that's what I taste like." It's a moment that suggests something sinister, that the Krabby Patty contains actual crab meat, and that Mr. Krabs just indulged in cannibalism. But think about this for a second. Bikini Bottom's population lacks crabs except for Mr. Krabs and his mother, implying others may have been harvested for food. And why wouldn't he? Mr. Krabs is notoriously obsessed with money. The Krusty Krab's success hinges on the Krabby Patty, whose secret formula remains guarded to protect copycats. If the patties used trapped crustaceans, Krabs could minimize costs while maximizing profits. It's the perfect scam. SpongeBob's paraphilia. As a character, SpongeBob has some weird habits, but now his intense attachments to specific activities have sparked theories, framing his behaviors as unconventional obsessions. His obsession with fry cooking at the Krusty Krab borders on compulsive, as he prioritizes work over his physical and mental well-being. He doesn't do anything by half. Even beyond work, SpongeBob exhibits hyper-fixated focus in hobbies like jellyfishing and bubble blowing, which he approaches with insane energy. These activities dominate his free time, often leading him to neglect his basic responsibilities. Like in Have You Seen This Snail, when SpongeBob neglects Gary to play with a toy. His enthusiasm extends even to niche interests like Mermaid Man fandom and karate, which he pursues with childlike intensity no matter how many times he fails. And it's even possible that all of this is due to his asexuality. With no clear romantic feelings toward anybody, he's pushed away from human interaction and toward these paraphilic-like fixations on unimportant things. Eat sperm. There are so many theories about the secret Krabby Patty formula that it's hard to know where to begin, but one of the most troubling is the idea that Mr. Krabs is knowingly selling his customers the bodily fluids of sperm whales. One frankly disgusting theory suggests that Pearl Krabs, Mr. Krabs' whale daughter, is the source. According to the suggestion, Mr. Krabs uses Pearl's vomit as the secret ingredient, explaining his extreme efforts to protect the formula and his endless financial indulgence toward her despite his notorious stinginess. But another angle ties the formula to sperm whale meat or even the sperm itself. There's one theory that highlights a prison escape episode featuring a sperm whale inmate who resembles Pearl's biological father. He helps Plankton out with his latest scheme. But the theory goes on to suggest that Pearl's mother was killed because of Mr. Krabs' desire to harvest her meat for profit. The addictive nature of the Krabby Patty is entirely due to cannibalism, explaining why shortages trigger intense withdrawal symptoms and all-out chaos. Level 5. I Was a Teenage Gary deleted scene. The episode I Was a Teenage Gary features some of the most unexpectedly disturbing and troubling imagery in the entirety of the series. But there's long been an urban legend about a deleted scene too disturbing to broadcast. The scene allegedly involves Squidward's transformation into a snail, and included material that was even more disturbing than what ended up airing. In the finished scene, there's a jarring transition. After Squidward is accidentally injected with snail plasma, a wipe cut shows SpongeBob, Squidward, and Gary as snails on a fence, with little explanation of what happened or how. That bizarre edit made people believe that an extended scene of Squidward's transformation was removed for being too disturbing, with some claiming that the original airing included even more grotesque body horror. But there's no actual proof this ever existed. VHS recordings of the very first airing have no such scene, and even the showrunner said that the scene was never storyboarded or animated, meaning it probably never existed. But the episode's deeply unsettling tone and disturbing transformation sequence meant that it was easy to imagine it did. Spongehenge is the real ending. Nobody has any idea when SpongeBob will actually come to an end, but some people believe that the creative team did have an end in mind and actually made it. In their minds, Spongehenge is the canonical ending to the entire series. The episode sees SpongeBob retreating to a cave after relentless jellyfish attacks disrupt his life. In his isolation, he constructs elaborate stone replicas of himself over years, but when he finally returns to Bikini Bottom, he discovers the Krusty Krab buried in sand and the entire population vanished, implying an extinct. The episode then fast-forward 3,000 years, showing alien tourists photographing the stone structures while SpongeBob's disembodied laugh echoes, suggesting his essence survives through the monuments. Krabs' parents are dead. We know that Mr. Krabs is obsessive with money, but the question of why remains an unsolved mystery. However, many fans have theorized that his obsession stems from unresolved childhood trauma tied to family instability. The episode Friend or Foe digs into Mr. Krabs' backstory, confirming that he was poor as a child, which is a very easy way to understand why he would become so obsessed with making money and never being in that position again. But the absence of his parents throughout the show raises yet more questions. Were they ever really there? Some have suggested that the answer is no. Theories range as to what exactly happened. Maybe they died, maybe they abandoned him, who knows? But there's a common suggestion that he was raised by pirates, a group stereotypically associated with treasure hoarding, which would make sense given the unusual way that he speaks is very pirate-like. But this kind of unusual upbringing would also create an early psychological link between wealth and emotional safety, leaving him to substitute human connections with money. Case in point, look how willing he is to sacrifice the lives of SpongeBob and Squidward for profit, like using them as bait in clams or building hazardous attractions in Krabby Land. There's no way of knowing what exactly happened to Krabs' parents, but the absence of parental figures in his life and obsession with money clearly suggests that he's looking for the economic safety he lacked in youth. Super Sponge Hidden File. In 2001, a PlayStation game released called SpongeBob SquarePants Super Sponge. Like most games of the era, it kind of came and went, making not much impact on the world, but years later, something changed. Somebody got a hold of Climax Studios' backups, locating the development files from Super Sponge and selling them on eBay in 2016. Whoever bought these files went on to upload them to the Internet Archive, and the world soon discovered some unused materials that strongly clashed with the game's family-friendly image. Among the most controversial discoveries were 3 NSFW sketches labeled naughty01.jpg, naughty02.jpg, and naughty03.jpg. The 3 images depicted SpongeBob, Patrick, and Sandy in explicit sexual scenarios, which were highly unsuitable for families. The artist behind the images was later identified as Nick Dry, who happily shared the originals on his blog with creative captions like, "SpongeBob takes Patrick up his starfish." I said creative, I never said classy. But the files also contained derogatory folder and asset names such as Old Bastard and Fish Folk Old Hag, alongside a folder dismissively titled New SBSP Like We Care. So I think it's fair to say that the crew were not happy happy to be working on the game. And actually, a critical internal document named SpongeBob says exactly that. The file lists complaints about the game's quality from the very people who made it, with one developer lamenting, "I'm sorry if things start to get a bit negative, but there isn't a lot to get that positive about." These highly explicit images were clearly made by people who had become jaded with the project and who truly hated the world of Bikini Bottom. The Strangler killed SpongeBob. In the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, there's a sequence in which SpongeBob and Patrick endure prolonged dehydration on land, and they somehow survive. Given that the show has repeatedly demonstrated the dangers of dehydration in Bikini Bottom, it makes no sense how they survived this unless they're already dead. Fans have theorized that the only reason SpongeBob can even survive the dehydration is because he's a ghost, likely killed beforehand. And who killed him? Well, in an earlier episode, SpongeBob Meets the Strangler, SpongeBob encounters a serial killer who vows to kill him. He hires a bodyguard to protect him, unaware that his own bodyguard is the killer. The bodyguard makes some subtle nods to his violent intent, such as mentioning he'd crush SpongeBob's windpipe. And the end of the episode sees Patrick in jail alongside the Strangler, but SpongeBob's absence suggests he met a much darker fate. So the ability to survive in the dry air of Shell City could only be explained if he isn't an actual physical living being. But that would also suggest that for the rest of the show after that episode, SpongeBob is a ghost, which makes the whole thing much darker. Bubble blowing is a metaphor for smoking. SpongeBob is usually portrayed as a good kid, which he clearly is, but we know that this show uses pretty light things to symbolize very dark topics, and bubble blowing may be one of them. The bubble blowing theory suggests that SpongeBob's love of bubble blowing is just a metaphor for nicotine addiction, with the bubbles representing cigarettes. If we go back to one of the first episodes, Bubble Stand, SpongeBob charges 25 cents per bubble session. Back in 1999, when the episode came out, a pack of cigarettes cost $3.90 a pack, which works out to around 20 cents a cigarette, so not far off at all. But then he starts enthusiastically selling to Patrick and Squidward in a way that is very similar to the peer pressure tactics used in tobacco promotion. And then of course Squidward develops an obsession and unrelenting bubble habit. In other cases, the bubbles are shown as a way to relax. Episodes like Little Yellow Book show SpongeBob sneaking bubble breaks during moments of high emotional distress, and he does it secretly to boot. There's also the fact that the boat exhausts send out bubbles instead of smoke, which makes the parallel basically undeniable. It's all really one big metaphor for addiction to cigarettes, and I'm not sure SpongeBob even cares. Mrs. Puff is in Shell City. In the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, Shell City is depicted as a grim gift shop where aquatic creatures are killed and turned into macabre novelties for surface world humans, which already is super dark. But when SpongeBob and Patrick visit, we briefly see a pufferfish resembling Mrs. Puff's deceased husband, Mr. Puff, shown as a lamp. Given that Mrs. Puff does not like to talk about what happened to her husband, it raises some serious questions. But Mrs. Puff isn't in the movie either, and given that the show has a flexible continuity, we could easily assume that she too met a similar fate. Either she was captured and sold as merchandise, or she fled Shell City before the movie even began. And it's not like this is out of character for her. Mrs. Puff has an established history of evading the authorities, with one story suggesting she fled New Kelp City after one of her students caused a fatal accident under her watch. It all suggests that she's a highly shady person. So whatever happened to her in Shell City, it probably wasn't good. Bikini Bottom is a nation. We've often talked about Bikini Bottom as being a town or a city, but as the show goes on, some people become more convinced that it's actually not at all either of those things. In fact, it may be a semi-autonomous nation. Throughout the show, Bikini Bottom is shown to be somewhat under the rule of King Neptune, a deity-like figure with absolute authority over the ocean. But Bikini Bottom also maintains its own elected leadership, including a mayor and references to a city council. That kind of structure is not common in small towns, but it is common in real-world constitutional monarchies like the United Kingdom or Denmark, where ceremonial figureheads coexist with democratic institutions. So basically, Bikini Bottom is not some small rinky-dink town trying to make it in the world, it's an entire nation in its own right, capable of doing whatever it wants, possibly even waging war on the rest of the ocean. It's possible. Sick SpongeBob. Whenever SpongeBob gets sick in the show, he gets really sick. But fans have noticed that all of his illnesses happen to align very closely with viruses viruses and infections in our own real world. The episode Suds and Fungus Among Us depict fictional illnesses with parallels to real-world diseases. The fungal overgrowth in Fungus Among Us also mirrors real-life fungal infections that thrive in warm, moist environments. The way that the green spores rapidly spread over SpongeBob's body echo how fungi can totally take over the bodies of its victims. Although, the way that the fungi take over SpongeBob's body is far from realistic, but I'm pretty sure we all knew that. I hope. Level 6. Squidward's penis is on his face. Nobody wants to think about Squidward's 9th tentacle, but this is a fan theory that has really taken off. Some fans believe that Squidward's nose is his penis. See, in real life octopus biology, male octopuses possess a specialized arm which is used to transfer sperm, and it's located near the head. So those highly intelligent viewers have come to believe that this biological detail inspired Squidward's prominent nose as a kind of visual joke. And some deep-sea species have penises that can extend past the beak, which would actually mirror Squidward's drooping nose. Later episodes like Code Yellow see Squidward looking for a nose job, which, some people believe it's a suggestion of a male enhancement surgery. I don't think I should go into much more detail than that, right? We also have to acknowledge that some scenes feature characters interacting with his nose in suggestive and borderline inappropriate ways, such as SpongeBob flicking it like a half-deflated balloon. Yeah. Or Squidward using a vacuum-like device on it in Squidville. Really don't know what to do with that one. I guess this theory would also explain his perpetually irritable demeanor as frustration over his unavoidable exposure. And we know that Nickelodeon has long hidden adult humor within its children's shows, so yes, maybe that is Squidward's tentacle. Squidward's breakdown. So we all know that Squidward is the most negative person in Bikini Bottom, unsatisfied with his life and consistently failing in his ambitions to achieve something more. But the episode Squid's Day Off sees him spiraling from misery into a full obsessive-compulsive breakdown. When he's left in charge of the Krusty Krab, Squidward attempts to take a day off, but he's consumed by intrusive thoughts of SpongeBob destroying the restaurant, which leaves him unable to do anything without stressing. It's not unlike people who have to consistently check that they turned the oven off. It's a form of OCD, and the anxiety quickly spirals and escalates into manic behavior. He ends up barricading himself at home, then sprinting back to work naked, convinced disaster has struck. All of this but people have come to see the episode as a reflection of Squidward's broken mental state. When he finally breaks down in the episode, it's not because of SpongeBob, it's because he realizes he has nothing more to live for. He has no achievements, no friends, and no success in the field he longs to work in. All he has is this depressing job. Which is why his naked sprint to the Krusty Krab is such a perfect visceral metaphor for vulnerability and desperation. Nasty Patty original draft / deleted scene. The episode Nasty Patty is a bizarre one in the series. It's an episode where SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs serve a health inspector a disgustingly contaminated Krabby Patty, and they get shocked when he seemingly dies because of it. They go on to try and cover up the death, even disposing of the body. And all of this is dark and disgusting enough, but storyboards and unused material reveal even darker concepts that were scrapped during production. One storyboard reveals a deleted scene showing SpongeBob attempting to make a patty even nastier by rubbing it on his groin area, which is gross. The production team agreed, or at least they were told not to do that, and decided to rewrite the gag to show him stuffing it into his sock instead. Early drafts also featured a more graphic depiction of the duo disposing of the inspector's body. And by graphic, we're talking about a sequence where they nearly incinerate it in a furnace, which takes the morbid tone of the episode even further. And then the original ending was something that Nickelodeon obviously pushed back on. Originally, the episode ended with the inspector's zombified corpse chasing SpongeBob and Krabs, leaning harder into horror comedy tropes the episode explores. But instead, the episode's ending was replaced with a less intense resolution where the inspector survives. Obviously, Nickelodeon tempered the episode's darker humor to align with its child-friendly brand, though remnants of the writer's grim creativity linger in the final product, making for an unusually darker episode than usual, but one that could have been even darker. The characters represent Marxist ideals. When you're dealing with cartoons, you can more or less apply anything to it, but some people have taken this to another level, arguing that SpongeBob SquarePants is one big metaphor for the Marxist class struggle. Yeah, The idea is that Mr. Krabs embodies the bourgeoisie, exploiting workers like SpongeBob and Squidward for profit, as seen in episodes like Born Again Krabs, where he sells SpongeBob's soul for just 62 cents. Squidward represents the alienated proletariat, aware of his exploitation but failing to unite workers to fight against the system. His attempts to unionize or quit, like in SpongeBob, on the other hand, symbolizes the unconscious proletariat, naively idealizing labor under Krabs and aspiring to be a part of the bourgeoisie, as shown in his Stockholm Syndrome-like loyalty to the company despite the blatant abuse and exploitation he suffers. And Patrick reflects Marx's lumpenproletariat, unemployed and disengaged from class struggle, but embodying anti-capitalist values through his rejection of work and prioritization of leisure above all. To sum all of this up, Bikini Bottom is portrayed as a microcosm of capitalist inequality, where authority figures just maintain the systemic disempowerment. There's that fun disenfranchisement we all want from a cartoon. Level 7. Patchy is SpongeBob. Patchy the Pirate is a side character in the SpongeBob world, but even he has his share of fan theories. One of the biggest is the theory that Patchy the Pirate represents an adult, disillusioned version of SpongeBob SquarePants. We all know that Patchy idolizes SpongeBob and his way of solving problems, but while SpongeBob embodies relentless childlike wonder, Patchy exists in a chaotic, low-budget human world where his fandom manifests as obsessive nostalgia rather than active enthusiasm. He never attempts to solve his problems in the same way, he doesn't have the same innocence as SpongeBob, all he has is a crude pirate aesthetic and constantly malfunctioning props. It has the same quirky vibe as SpongeBob's antics in the ocean, but without the innocence. Of course, there is a deeper connection here in that both SpongeBob and Patchy are played by the same actor, Tom Kenny, and then of course exist in different realms, one cartoon, one real. There's also the odd way that the show is framed, with Patchy's pirate sequences often bookending SpongeBob's adventures as if reminiscing on them. Where SpongeBob views setbacks through rose-tinted bubble lenses, Patchy's attempts to celebrate his idol frequently devolve into slapstick disaster, suggesting adulthood has warped playful energy into desperation. Essentially, Patchy is SpongeBob, made human and stripped of his genuine childhood joy. Squid Baby is fetish porn. Squid Baby is without a doubt one of the weirdest episodes of the entire series, and many people have developed a similarly disturbing theory to explain what exactly is going on with it. In the episode, Squidward suffers a head injury and regresses to infant-like behavior, complete with diaper wearing and being treated as a literal baby by SpongeBob and Patrick. When it was first released, viewers were extremely uncomfortable with the concept, and the visuals of Squidward in a diaper, SpongeBob force-feeding him mush, and the duo's exaggerated parental roles involving mock discipline and bizarre caretaking rituals. But some people started to believe that the show was normalizing an unsettling fetish called paraphilic infantilism, adult baby syndrome. People who are into this like to roleplay as if they have regressed to an infant-like state to be babied by their partner. It's not the kind of thing anybody wants to see in a children's cartoon. Nickelodeon has never made a comment on the episode, but the episode's legacy remains controversial to this day, with many convinced that it's subtextually all about this fetish. Alternate timelines theory. Every episode of SpongeBob SquarePants exists in a unique continuity where the world resets after the end of the story. That means that there's no coherence in the world, nothing that lasts from episode to episode beyond the physical characters and locations. Seasons 1 through 3 are considered the original timeline, but then came the movie, and everything onward is believed to be an entirely new reality where the characters are darker, more sinister. Squidward's existential despair in episodes like SB-129 and Bikini Bottom's increasingly cynical society are all things never seen in that original set of episodes. Now, we have a credible reason for why the series is constantly shifting in tone and why character dynamics are ever shifting. We're seeing alternate realities, alternate worlds. Some episodes, like The Algae's Always Greener, explicitly explore timeline divergence in the story itself. Meanwhile, SB-129 and Are You Happy Now take us to the other timelines, which hint at a darker meta-awareness. Squidward's time travel-induced nihilism and depressive spiral suggests that these characters are somehow actually starting to realize that their existence is fractured. But this theory suggests that the characters spend all of eternity suffering in loops. SpongeBob's eternal optimism contrasts with Squidward's cyclical torment, implying that this will be their fate for all of eternity. The characters are drug addicts. Ever since the series began, there's been an argument that the characters symbolize drug use, with each main figure embodying traits stereotypically linked to specific substances. SpongeBob's hyperactive imagination, rapid mood shifts between euphoria and panic, and surreal adventures align with hallucinogenic mushroom use, as his behavior mirrors both good trips and bad trips associated with these trippy substances. On the other hand, Patrick's lethargy, constant snacking, and slow speech are tied to marijuana, reflecting stereotypes of cannabis-induced relaxation and hunger. He doesn't want to do anything but chill and have a good time. Squidward's mood swings, deceptive tendencies, and poor work performance are likened to heroin addiction, drawing parallels to withdrawal symptoms and behavioral changes. But he's also exceedingly grumpy, so it will just boost his already miserable mood. Mr. Krabs and Mrs. Puff's irritability and paranoia, exemplified by Krabs' obsession with money and Puff's anxiety over SpongeBob's driving, are attributed to cocaine use. Sandy Cheeks is often cited as the sole sober character. It actually seems to line up pretty well, all things considered. Squidward's dad abused him. Even though it's been a character trait since the very beginning, people are always looking for a reason to justify Squidward's misery. And the one thing that fans lean on more than any other is the potential that he was abused as a child by his father. There's not much in the show to suggest this was the case, although it has been said by SpongeBob that Squidward's father never hugged him. But his behavior has often been viewed through a lens of unresolved trauma. Squidward's cynicism, social isolation, and self-sabotaging tendencies, such as his disdain for SpongeBob's optimism and his failed artistic ambitions, are often attributed to deeper emotional wounds. After all, most people who suffer these kinds of outbursts of frustration and self-loathing have it rooted in their unhappy childhoods. In episodes like Band Geeks and Dying for Pie, Squidward's fragile self-worth and fear of failure hint at a background where validation was conditional or absent. Though the show never confirms parental abuse, his constant avoidance of vulnerability and tendency to project blame align with behaviors linked to childhood adversity. For instance, his classical training and rivalry with Squilliam Fancyson imply a high-pressure upbringing where success defined his worth. The theory suggests that Squidward's father might have enforced rigid standards, leading to his perfectionism and eventual burnout. But others believe that Squidward's negativity stems more from workplace exploitation under Mr. Krabs and societal alienation. However, the absence of parental figures in his life fuels speculation about a troubled home life. Everywhere at the end of Bikini Bottom. Everywhere at the end of Bikini Bottom recontextualizes the vibrant, absurdist world of Bikini Bottom to be a haunting metaphor for dementia, mirroring the caretakers everywhere at the end of time. The album distorts and degrades samples from the show's soundtrack and dialogue. What initially seems like familiar, playful elements, like the whimsical track titles, quickly descend into something unfamiliar and creepy, just like what happens to people who suffer from dementia. Lyrics like "Who lives in a pineapple under the sea," or phrases from characters like Squidward become slurred, stretched, or buried under layers of distortion, symbolizing the struggle to grasp fading recollection. The whole experience is extremely disturbing and scary, especially since the album's cover art, a warped, decaying Krusty Krab, visually reinforces this metaphor. The whole thing is designed to make you deeply uncomfortable, to come to terms with what dementia is. Even the most vivid, bright memories are impermanent with this condition. Everything fades into an unsettling, unfamiliar echo, even something as bright as Bikini Bottom.